Welcome back to the Crack the Code podcast. And I'm just wondering, it's January. A lot of times we're thinking about maybe doing some decluttering, moving things around. And have you ever done that or have you gotten stuck? Today, we're going to have some great tips. I'm so excited to have my friend Conny Graf with us. Conny is a Swiss certified expert in finance and accounting and a certified clutter clearing practitioner. She's helping business owners create supportive, clutter-free environments in their mind, surroundings, and finances. But more importantly, she helps them develop intentional habits, systems, and processes that work for them and prevent clutter from creeping back. She says clearing clutter is self-love, and a few minutes a day keeps the chaos away. So welcome, Conny.
Well, thank you so much, Cora, for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on, especially this time of year. Sometimes we do the spring cleanings, but, January is kind of the beginning of a year, a new start. And many people are looking to, clean things away, declutter, make life a little simpler and easier. So I'm looking forward to learning some tips from you. But first, I would like to learn a little bit more about you. I know you were Swiss trained in your finances, so I'm curious how you got from Switzerland to Canada, which our listeners might not know is that's where you're living now.
Yeah, I live in Vancouver, Canada, so on the west coast. It's quite far away from Switzerland, but it's all my dad's brother, so my uncle's fault. So my uncle moved here to Vancouver in 69 or 1970, some crazy long time ago. And while I was learning for my accounting degree, he got the promise from me that afterwards I would come visit. So I came here in 1996 the first time and fell in love with it. And that's how I ended up here. It took a few years, but I got here eventually.
Yeah. So what do you love more about the west coast of Canada than Switzerland? Because that's a picturesque place to be as well.
Yes. Well, it's really hard, but so I love the ocean. I love the smell of ocean, sand, water. I love that a lot. We don't have that in Switzerland. It's really hard to say because I do miss Switzerland. So I always say like once you moved away from your home country, it's kind of like you're in a hard spot because you will always feel homesick. But if you would move back, you would feel homesick for the other place. So,
Yeah.
I totally feel homesick, but I love the ocean here. And it was so funny when I landed at the airport here in 1996. I just felt at home. And I don't know why. I can't tell you why. It's just something kept me here. But I'm somebody who goes back to Switzerland a lot because I couldn't live without Switzerland. So.
Yes. Well, it is nice to have that option to go back and forth and get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, now that the pandemic is a little bit at bay, we can do that again. Yes.
Yeah. And so how did you make that leap from doing financial stuff into the decluttering and world and helping people, create their own special spaces?
Yeah, so actually the decluttering came even before the finances, but back then nobody talked really about decluttering or organizing. But I was a weird teenager. I would already love to organize, reorganize, declutter. I would do that constantly with my room. Then friends of mine would say, "Would you come help me?" So I would help them. And then when it was time to pick a career, my parents kind of pushed me towards banking, and I didn't want to do banking, so I did finances, which they were happy with. And it turned out I was really good, or I'm really good with numbers and everything. And then when I was in my career, people would always comment, "You have such an organized office, you have such an organized desk." So I would start helping them figure out too how they can also be more organized, and that's kind of how this all happened. So it's kind of it was kind of full circle when I got back to helping people getting organized and decluttering.
Yeah. And I can see that. I've worked in a lot of offices over the years, and some people just have the neatest desk, everything's so tidy, and other people are in total chaos. And yet they can seem to kind of find things because
Yeah.
they know where they are in their piles, but I'm imagining that inside it's still that scattered feeling that they have because things are not, organized in some kind of a way.
Yeah, so science tells us that our environment has a big impact on us, and I actually felt that already as a child, the impact of the environment. That's kind of how I got into reorganizing, moving around furniture and all that. And so I'm not saying we all need to have these perfectly neat and tidy spaces, but you do your body and your concentration not a favor when you have a mess around you. So those people who can function in chaos, um, they just put more strength, or how do you say that? They put themselves under a harder time, more stress and everything, and so they probably don't even notice because they're so used to being under this weight. And so it can help just to create a little bit of more of an organization and a little bit more space around you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I know for myself, whenever I do take some time to reorganize the space at your house, whether it's a cupboard in the kitchen or your closet in the bedroom, you
Mm,
always feel like a huge weight has been lifted. You
yeah.
feel lighter, like you've lost 10 pounds and all you've
Yeah.
done is move some of your stuff around or maybe taken out a garbage bag. I mean, I live in a tiny house, and every 6 months I do a reorganization of my stuff, and I can't believe how much I can take out of my place. It's like, where is
Yeah.
this stuff even coming from?
Yeah. And Cora, that's totally normal because we humans are like we always said, we're hunter-gatherers. No, so we're gatherers, maybe not so much hunters anymore, but
Yeah.
gatherers. And that's what happens, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're not on a regular cycle of letting go of things again, then it starts to become a problem. And so I love it when you say, oh, every 6 months I'm going through something. That's a good rhythm for you if that works for you, and that's totally good. And then you let go of it, and that's perfect. But most people, they have their things for years and years stored in all kinds of places. And the weight, it's literally, you can feel it, like you just said, that the weight lifts when you let go of some of the things. And the more you kind of cling to them, the harder it will be to let them go, but the more you will also be feeling freed of it. So,
Yeah.
or yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing I noticed now that I'm living in a smaller space. What I really have figured out is that we fill up the space that we have. So if you
Yeah.
live in a big house, you need more things to fill it up just to keep that space from looking like a giant cavern. And when you're in a smaller space, you have to have less, but it's just like for me, it's easier to keep track of. I'm not I don't love cleaning a house. So if it's a
Yes.
smaller space, it's nice to have that. It's easier to look after. And when something comes in, you have to make space for it. So you might have to remove something. But I know a lot of people that are in this age, kids are moving out and people are downsizing and getting ready for retirement and all that kind of thing. It can be very emotional to, go through all their things and have to get rid of things. And maybe you can give us some tips on how to downsize if that's what people are going through.
Yeah, and you're right, it is very emotional. That's also what oftentimes trips people up when they start. What I noticed is that a lot of people start, or at least focus on the hard things to let go, like all the
Mm.
things they're really fond of or clinging to it, instead of trying to go with the so-called low-hanging fruit, like all
Mm.
this stuff that you know already. Okay, I have no problem to let that go, or this is really easy. I'm not so attached to it. And so this is for sure the first tip. Don't go with your grandma's china or
Yeah.
whatever. Don't think, and don't even think of these things right now, because you're not in a position to make a decision now about this, and it will keep you from doing anything if you're focusing on that. So focus on easy, easy, not so emotional, because most people have a kind of like, we all have an emotional connection to all the things around us. It's just some connection is weaker and looser, and others is like really intense. So start with that, and good places to start with is just all the wherever you store a lot of the things, like kitchen is often, it
Mhm.
depends a little bit on your hobbies, but kitchen is often a good place to start. Bathrooms is a good place to start. Don't go, like, a lot of people dream of cleaning their garage or their basement, but that's usually, even though you're not using these things, that's usually all the stuff that is emotionally explosive, how I call it. So don't go there. And then a second tip is for sure to not take on too much. So most people think, oh, I just gonna declutter, I don't know, my whole kitchen today. And this is way too much, because your decluttering can be very draining if you put too much on you. So just say, okay, let's just do this cupboard today, or if it's a big cupboard, even just do one shelf today, and then pat yourself on the back and walk away and do something else, rather than completely exhausting yourself. So
Yeah, I find that it can be overwhelming if you think, oh, this weekend, I'm going to do the whole bedroom or something like that. And
forget it.
then you just get so overwhelmed, you don't even know where to start anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And who wants to spend their weekends decluttering, even
Yeah.
though the reward is actually a really good one, that you're feeling so much better. But most people don't get motivated or can't get started if they're planning out too much time, or like a whole weekend or a whole day, or so that's why I'm saying just start small and do over time more and more. That's way more sustainable, and it's not so hard to get motivated either.
Yeah, I find that too, especially if you're doing like a drawer, like you say in the kitchen, or you have that junk drawer. I don't have a junk drawer anymore because I don't have a house big enough to have a junk drawer.
Yeah.
But if you just say, okay, I'm just going to do that one drawer. And sometimes just by doing that one drawer, then you kind of get in the mode. Sometimes it's just about starting the process. And
Yes.
then you think, okay, well,
Mhm.
that was okay. Maybe I can do one more drawer, and you
Yes.
get into a rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right, because it's you get the reward when you do a small area. You get the reward, and that may motivate you to do more, or you can just be proud of yourself that you did something and stop for that day and do something else later, rather than putting too much on yourself. Then in the middle of it, you're getting so exhausted and you're getting demotivated and disillusioned, because then you think again, oh, I knew I can't do it, which is sad. We all can do it. It's just sometimes we sabotage ourselves with wrong approaches. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you don't, like you say, don't get anything. I know my husband always jokes around that he wants to have a bigger shed where we live, because we have a certain size we're allowed to have, and ours is just under. But some people have a bigger one. And I'm like, you know what? What's the point? Because what are you going to get? What do you want more of that you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
have? You're just going to fill up that space.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And then I have a lot of friends too that are getting to the other point where their parents are getting older, and now they're having to help the parents do some decluttering and sorting, because the parents are maybe moving into some assisted living or something like that. And that is a very emotional time too, because lots of times these parents have lived in their home for many, many years, and they're from the generation where they don't throw things away. So they have a lot of stuff, and it can be very difficult to help them go through that process. Do you have any tips or anything you can help people with that? Because it's trying to sort somebody else's stuff, not even just your own.
Yeah, and that is always almost a danger zone, because you are not attached to these things most of the time, but your parents are, and or whoever else you're helping. But if we're talking about parents right now, and then we have to remember that it is a very, very charged situation to begin with, because having to downsize kind of signals to our brain too, when you are at that age, that a new stage of your life is starting and that you're moving, like we can't deny that anymore, we're moving towards maybe even the end of our life. So there's a lot of grief involved. So the tip I have is just, like, again, also start with the low hanging fruit. Don't start with the most difficult stuff first. All the things that your parents know, oh, I can't take it or I don't want to take it, start with that stuff, and focus more on what they're looking forward to when they have a different, where they're going, when they have a different place, and how they could make their life there really nice and easier and everything. That may help them too, to let things go. And just a lot of compassion. And sometimes it may really also help to get some professional help in, who is trained in that. Because, so for example, even though I said I was as a teenager already helping people with that, I did go through extra training, because clutter, and especially when we're talking about downsizing, there's a lot of grief involved. And grief is not always just if somebody dies. Grief is also if our life changes, if we have to complete a stage of our life and move into a new one. And so if you can get somebody in who is trained, like me, who is trained in clutter clearing, that was also trained in grief, or if you have somebody who is trained in grief, just to support a bit, because it can be really hard, and we may not understand what they're going through, and may make things unintentionally worse, maybe, rather than being helpful. So
yeah, I can see that. I hadn't really thought of it like in those terms before, like with the grief. But yeah, that's a big major event for everybody, and trying to, give ourselves the space to make that move. Hopefully it doesn't, they have some time that they can do that and take some thought around it. That's a really good perspective to have. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I want to say one more time, maybe, and that's not just for parents, but if you, no matter who you help, don't just tell them, oh, just get rid of it. Yeah. It has to be the decision of the person. Otherwise, you may create some resentment between you. For you, it might be, why are you holding on to this? Just get rid of it. But the other person has to make the decision. It can't be you. It's not your life. You could just think how you would feel if somebody would come to you and try to take away something that you're really attached to, and say, well, just throw it away. So that was one of the things that in that grief education that I just talked about, they were really animate about, that we'll never tell the other person what to do. And so, but that goes for anybody. Like, even if you help your husband, I mean, you can ask questions, it's like you just said, well, what would you want to put there? Or what would you want to keep? Or why do you need more space? But never kind of say, oh, well, just get rid of it. This is because it's without respect for the other person.
Yeah. For sure. I know. I always remember some kind of one of those design shows on TV. And when they were helping people redesign, they had 3 piles. They would get them to put stuff outside, like the get rid of pile, the not sure pile, and the keep in pile. And so then they did it like in steps. So once the people saw all their stuff out there, then they could kind of pick and choose, and then they would know how much room do they have for, and then they had to make another decision. So they did it in stages, because sometimes you just can't think about it, like you say, right in the moment, because it's too emotionally charged.
Yes. Yeah. And you get also decision fatigue, like, especially if you do too long. I would imagine when they do these shows, that goes on for hours. And after, I don't know how long of making decisions, yes, no, keep, or whatever, your brain can't handle it anymore. And then everything is, I don't know. Or depending on what kind of nature person you are, you may say, oh, get rid of it, and then later regret it, or so totally.
Yeah. Oh, but it's been so great to have you on with all these tips today, Conny. And I know you have a podcast too. So if our listeners want to learn more about Conny's decluttering, and it's not just your space, but also in your mind, we have a lot of things going on in there that we got to declutter. You can check out your podcast at From Chaos to Peace. And then I think you have something for people if they want to go to, is it on your website that the listeners can go?
So I created a nice link for your listeners. So my website is connygraf.com, CONNYGRAF.com, and then /crack the code. And then you get to a page where they can download a PDF that helps them create the perfect workspace for themselves. And it's not just for the desk. You can use it in your kitchen, or if you're an artist, you can use it in your atelier, wherever. It has a framework in it that I talk about how to think, how to organize your space, and they can download that
that's
guide if they want to.
Oh, that's awesome. So we'll have all that in the show notes for people that are listening. If you're driving and you can't grab it right away, it's there. Just hop on and take a look. Again, thank you so much, Conny, for being on here today. And for our listeners, if you're thinking about doing some decluttering or downsizing or helping somebody, remember just to give yourself some space. Allow yourself some time to go through the process and start with small chunks. It just makes it so much easier. And then just remember, it's never too late.